This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com. Hey there everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sketchup, a 3D toolbox. I'm Cameron Harris, and this is episode number 39. Now, today we're going to continue working on our backyard project by modeling some brick pathways for a rose garden. Now, I've mentioned in past episodes, this is actually a real backyard we're modeling, and I happen to have some photos of this rose garden so you can see what we're going to be doing today. You can see that what we've got here is a kind of a circular pathway with sort of a cross-shaped pathway branching out from its four corners. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So as you can see, our model is exactly as we left it in our last episode. If you haven't been following along with us, you can download this model here, this exact SketchUp project, in the show notes for this episode. Just download the lesson file and you'll be able to follow along with us right from there. Now, you can see that as of right now, we've got our main plot of land that we're working on, this white part here. We've got our patio over here, and we've got this retaining wall area over here. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start adding that rose garden that we were just showing. Now, to start off with, what I've done real quick is I've just made sure that all of my individual objects here are grouped to make sure that nothing will stick. And I've also gone ahead and created a new layer over in my layers window called Rose Garden. And I've gone ahead and made that the active layer so anything that I model from now on will go into that layer automatically. So go ahead and close that. So now we're going to start modeling the rose garden. Now to start with, I'm going to go ahead and just draw a big rectangle that will be the general size of that particular part of the ground. So now the rose garden starts, it's basically a big kind of a rectangle that is nestled in between these two parts of the retaining wall here, and then it sticks out past the patio certain ways. And I've gone ahead and taken measurements. So what we're going to do first is, well, we don't really need a measurement for how wide it is because it needs to fit perfectly in between these two parts of the retaining wall. If I use the tape measure tool, you can see that that's going to be about 19.5 feet. So that's perfect. And then in terms of how far out it's going to go, I'm going to go ahead and draw a guideline. Starting at this back part of the retaining wall here and pulling out, I'm going to go ahead and make that 224 inches. That's how long I've estimated that this particular part is. And you can see it comes out not quite to the very end of the patio, but right along here. And now I'm just going to go ahead and draw a rectangle that will fit in between all of this. So I'm going to start at this back corner right here, switch to the rectangle tool with the R key and click at this corner, and I'm going to start pulling this out. And you can see that it snaps right there perfectly. So now what I want to do is I just want to go ahead and type in my exact dimensions to make sure it's just right. So the first thing I'm going to do is type in my 19.5 feet, so 19.5 apostrophe, comma, and then 224 for 224 inches, hit return. There we go. So now I've got my perfect rectangle. Don't worry about the weird distortions we're getting there. This face is, technically speaking, occupying the same space as this face down below, so don't worry about that. That's perfectly normal. We'll go ahead and select our guideline and delete it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start working on those the bricks that surround those pathways. So the way we're going to do that is, first of all, we're going to draw the circle in the very center of this. So to find the center of that circle, I took a couple of measurements and I figured it out. I'm going to go ahead and draw a couple of guidelines to kind of mark where the center of that circle needs to be. Now, the first thing I'm going to draw is a guideline coming out this way, which is going to be 10 feet 2 inches. So I'll do a 10 apostrophe 2. There we go. That's that one. And the other one I'm going to do is coming from here back there. I'm going to do 8.5 feet. So 8.5 apostrophe. And that right there is the center of where our circle is going to be. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the circle tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click right in the center, so that's where the center of our circle is going to be, and I'm going to stretch this out. Now I measured this, and the radius, which is what we can enter in our value down in our dimensions box, is the radius of this circle is going to be 44 inches. So I'm just going to type in 44, go. And you can see now we've got a nice circle in the middle there. I'm going to go ahead and delete these guidelines. So this is that, and again, ignore the weird distortion lines here. Those aren't going to be around for very much longer once we start extruding this into 3D. But now what we need to do is we need to create the smaller circle. So this is how big this circular pathway is, but it wasn't just one big circle, it was actually more like a ring. So to create the ring, I'm going to select this face, hit the F key to switch to the offset tool, and offset this thing here in. And that's going to be about 23 inches. So this part right here is our pathway. This is the gravel pathway right there. And the next thing we're going to do is draw the straight pathways that come out kind of like in a cross kind of a shape. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do something a little bit different. This is going to be using quite a few guidelines. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring back the guidelines. So you actually could just keep them, keep the original guidelines here if you wanted to. So that right there, there's the center of our circle. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw some more guidelines. I'm going to zoom in on this guideline down here. And each of these pathways, the straight pathways, are 26 inches wide. So this is where the center of the pathway needs to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the tape measure tool and draw two guidelines, one that'll go to the left and one that'll go to the right of this center guideline, 13 inches. So that way I'll have this 13-inch strip, and then I'll have this 13-inch strip, and now this right here, this shape right here, is a 26-inch pathway, and that's perfect. I'm going to do the same thing to these other guidelines that I have here. Just come out on one side, 13 inches, come out on the other side, 13 inches. And you can see that they've actually, those guidelines have stretched all the way across, so I don't need to do them 4 times. That's excellent. I'm going to go ahead and delete these center guidelines, so all I'm left with are the outer kind of traces of where my pathways are going to be. And now I'm going to start filling in those lines, but not all the way, just to this ring here. So I'm going to hit the L key for the line tool, and it's that point right there is where this guideline and our exterior circle intersect. So I'm going to click there and just trace out to the edge. Click there. Oops. Gotta be very careful where you click. There we go. Trace out to the edge like that. And do the same thing for these other lines here. So you can see here that I've finished tracing all my lines. I'm going to go ahead and delete all the guidelines. So I'm going to go up to Edit, Delete Guides, because I've got so many of them. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select these parts. If I zoom in here, you see that these line segments of the circle that are within the path, I want to get rid of those. So I'm going to hit the Delete key. When I drew the lines, it automatically split all of these line segments apart at that point. So there we go. Beautiful. So now I have this shape right here. Now this is where my gravel pathway is going to be, and these are the plots of dirt where the roses will be planted eventually. But at the moment, the lines that are dividing all of these up are just lines. They're one-dimensional lines in Sketchup, and I don't want that. I want them to have depth because they're actually going to be brick. So to do that, what am I going to do? I'm going to use the offset tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select each of these dirt plots, and let me show you what your instinct might be to select all of this interior part here, use the offset tool, and just offset it, maybe 2 inches. And while that's true, that's a very easy way to go. It's not quite right because you're offsetting it in like this. And when you're doing that, you're actually making all of the pathways narrower than they actually are. Remember, we built these pathways so that this shape right here is where all the gravel should be. If we offset inward, we're going to lose some of that space. and then we're not going to have a very accurate model. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to actually select each of these individual plots of land right here. So I'll select this one, for example, use the offset tool, and offset this one in 2 inches. And then do the same thing for all of them. This way we're not affecting the actual shape of our gravel pathways. We're keeping them exactly the same, and we're just shrinking the land plot. So that looks great there. The one thing that you'll notice is that if you look down here, we've offset this outer part here, this outer part, but there's not brick on these outer edges. It goes into other things, more gravel or different things. We don't have actual borders there. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of those. And what we're going to do is just going to do a little bit of cleanup work by using the line tool and just clicking on this part here and drawing a line, and going over here on this edge and drawing a line, continuing the brick border all the way to the edge, and then just using the eraser tool and deleting these exterior lines here. So that way we still have this part here, which is where our brick is, but we don't have anything on the edges of these plots of ground here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to all the rest of these plots. So that looks great there. I've got all my brick borders done, and I'm just going to do the same thing to this interior circle here. I'm just going to offset this in 2 inches. And there we go. That's done. So now I've got a 2-dimensional sketch kind of all this stuff. Now I'm going to start extruding it into 3D, and I'm going to start with the brick portions. So I'm going to use the push-pull tool to select this part here, and I'm going to pull it up. And I'm going to pull it up so that it's at the same height as my patio over here. So I'm just going to hover over the patio and select that. Perfect. That's about 1.5 inch. So I'm just going to do that to all of these here. This is where snapping really comes in handy, because you can just select one and just snap to the other. There we go. So I've got that. And I'm going to do the same thing to this center ring here. And now we're going to do something about this weird distortion, the purple and white effect here. I'm going to pull up these plots of earth here. I'm going to pull them up about just 1/2 inch. And I'm going to do the same thing to this gravel interior part here. Just like that. Perfect. And now because we've got some 3-dimensional space between this plot of ground and the actual master lot space down here, now we're all good to go. No more distortions. Of course, the entire thing is purple, and sometimes when you model, for some reason, Sketchup just makes things purple, because that means basically they're inside out. To kind of flip them right side in, I'm just going to triple click here to select all of these faces, right click on them, and choose reverse faces, and now they're all white, just as it was meant to be. And you can see here that now we've got some really, really great stuff going on here. We've got our brick here, gravel there, dirt everywhere else. And now we're going to start just texturing this in really quick. We're not going to do any of the plant life or the fountain or anything like that. At this point, we're just kind of getting the basic structure of everything down. And it just so happens we've already got some gravel textures over here. I'm going to hit B for the bucket tool. And I'm just going to hold down the Command key or the Control key if you're on a PC and click. You see, notice that makes it the eyedropper tool. I'm going to click on this gravel over here to sample that. Put that in our walkway there. And I'm going to do the same thing for this ground cover over here for our planter. Put that in there. Very nice. And now I just need to come up with a nice brick. Oh, forgot to put in some in there too. Good. Now I just got to come up with a brick kind of a texture for our brick borders. Let's go with something like brick and cladding. See what we've got there. And let's try this guy and see how he looks. That looks just about perfect. Now, I'm going to undo applying that texture real quick. Remember that we could go through and paint all of these different textures individually, but remember, the only texture that's left that we haven't textured that's still white is all brick. So if we could click on each face individually, but if we hold down the Option key and click on one of the faces, it textures all of them except for that interior part, but it textures all of the remaining white parts with brick. And it does catch these edges here, but those are going to be covered up eventually anyway, so we don't need to worry about that. So that's looking very, very nice. Very nice indeed. So we've got all this brick part here, we've got our gravel, and we've got our dirt plots. All that's left to do now is just triple click and make the whole thing a group. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Sketchup, a 3D Toolbox. Remember that if you want to follow along with us and you haven't been in the past, you can download the latest lesson file from the show notes for this episode on our website, www.harwoodpodcast.com. And also, if you have any questions or comments for me about the show, you can send me an email at cameron@harwoodpodcast.com. Until next time, I'll just say goodbye and good modeling.